You're listening to an exclusive podcast of Gold Hawk Fights Back for You on AM740 Zoomer Radio. Gold Hawk Fights Back for You airs Monday to Friday, 11 to 1 on AM740 Zoomer Radio.
For the last number of days, we've been talking about Health Canada's wind turbine noise and health study just released a number of days ago. I now have a PowerPoint presentation on the release that had been posted on the Health Canada website a few days ago. It still leaves a lot of questions to be answered, as you have heard from some of our guests over the past few days. My guest today to talk about it is epidemiologist Joan Morris. She's been researching impacts of industrial wind turbines for the past 6 years or so. She has 25 years of experience in pharmaceutical research and holds a Master of Health Science degree in community health and epidemiology. Joan Morris, welcome to Zoomer Radio.
Dale, thanks for having me on the show.
Well, most pleased to have you. I found the report, just as a mere mortal, somewhat confusing. It seemed to be saying one thing in one paragraph, and then in another part of this document it said precisely the opposite. I mean, the overall message was, the message picked up initially by the news media, that, well, there's no direct link between negative health impacts and wind turbine noise, but then you go on to read, and a careful reader such as yourself notes that, well, of course, it's quite the opposite.
Well, exactly, and I'm really concerned about the interpretation and the marketing of this report. First of all, it's disturbing to me and to those citizens who are being affected that the government agencies minimizing the public's perception of these adverse impacts, and that the report should be so confusing to people is, in itself a concern. And one of the things I want to talk about is, some of the findings that are related to annoyance specifically. Yeah. There are a lot of gaps in methodology and a lot of biases that I've found in both the design and in the way that the report's been presented. But we need to realize that the wind turbine noise annoyance was actually found to be statistically related to several of the people's self-reported health effects. And so statistically significant findings in the effects of the wind turbine noise annoyance on blood pressure, migraines, tinnitus, dizziness, reports on their Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, their perceived stress. They also had statistically significant findings in their hair cortisol. That's a measure of stress, systolic and diastolic blood pressure. Now, unfortunately, the study design didn't allow them to really get into the cause and effect relationships there. But the fact that they found them and that they're statistically significant should in itself cause us to raise some pretty significant alarm bells.
Well, I mean, in part, to me, it seems like an exercise in semantics. They're saying no health effects, but we do have annoyance. But I think many of us know that the World Health Organization, for one organization, one of many, in fact, defines annoyance as a health effect all by itself.
Of course. The World Health Organization has done epidemiological studies that assess noise annoyance, and they've found that there are significant risks in cardiovascular, respiratory, musculoskeletal effects, depression. Mm-hmm. There's definitely a causal relationship between strong annoyance and increased morbidity. And what people also need to realize, too, is that what we're talking about here in using the term annoyance isn't just a minor temporary nuisance that we use, when we use the colloquial term annoyance, like a bee buzzing around your head or something like this.
Yeah, it's an underplayed word, isn't it?
Exactly. For people who live in an environment with industrial wind turbines, the exposure can be 24/7, and these residents have no way to turn it off or to obtain relief. So annoyance is a disturbing level of noise, and we also have to remember that noise is subjective. It's not an objective measure, and one of the aspects that is a bit difficult to connect the dots on from this study is the fact that they use the word noise, wind turbine noise, when really all they have done, from what I can understand, is to use predictive modeling based on the output of the sound levels that they get from manufacturers of the wind turbines. In one part of the report,
that sounds like nothing at all, to be quite honest.
Well, it's difficult to really get a handle on from the reports, but in one part of the report, it says that they conducted over 4,000 hours of wind turbine noise measurements. Well, first of all, I guess they would be sound measurements, but I'm not an acoustician, but as a layperson, when I look at it even further, they say they did at least one actual measurement at each location. And then they said modeling is considered more accurate in representing average wind turbine sound levels compared to discrete measurements. Well, they're using averages. You know, our bodies don't work on averages. What about the worst case scenarios? And what about the longer term effects of exposures that are outside of the average? But then why are we relying on a study that didn't actually measure true levels and relied on predictive measures? They used predictive models. And then they go on to say in their indoor sound pressure levels that they were estimated using this specific criterion. And it says the maximum outdoor to indoor level difference is assumed to be 25 decibels.
Well, an awful lot of assumptions and estimates going on in this report, I would say.
Exactly. Why are they assuming anything, and why are they using models? They spent over $2 million on this study, and they've used modeling. It's just really inexcusable.
Well, I mean, does the report have worth in as much as that if you read it carefully, if you study it, as you have, but you have added expertise the rest of us don't have, that when you look at it, it is saying that there are negative health effects, annoyance, with wind turbines. The message is there. It's just being bent and twisted into exactly the opposite kind of marketing mode.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it does appear to be all about the marketing and all about the messaging. What they did find, if you look at the PowerPoint, and I have a copy of it as well.
Yeah, I have it right in front of me.
Yeah, what they found is that annoyance with wind turbine noise was found to become an issue at sound levels of approximately 35 decibels.
Good grief.
dBA. But you and I both know that wind turbines in Ontario are being situated where the predicted sound levels, these are predicted averages, are up to 40.
Yeah.
And the actual sound levels are allowed to go up to 51 dBA. So basically, the Health Canada report confirms that the current siting of wind turbines in Ontario allows residents to be impacted significantly by wind turbine noise.
I wonder if anyone in the Ontario government, all those people who are very gung-ho on wind turbines, know that, or have they concluded that from their reading of the study? That would be interesting to know, wouldn't it?
It would definitely be. And another point that I noticed is that wind turbine noise annoyance in the assessments they performed in Ontario actually persisted up to distances of 1 to 2 kilometers. So if you looked at all of the residents who are exposed at distances up to 2 kilometers away from all of the wind turbines in Ontario, and you look at the fact that their modeling exercises actually show that at 550 meters, 25% of the population would be very or extremely annoyed.
Totally unacceptable. I mean, what technology thinks it's okay to have 25% of people negatively affected by it?
Right. If you expose the population of Toronto, according to my calculations, to that same exposure, you'd have 625,000 people affected, or in Canada, 8.8 million people.
Yeah.
How would we react if there was a consumer product or a health product with such profound effects?
Well, true
enough.
I
mean, it's really just incredible. And so, you have to ask yourself why this is being accepted. And I have some concerns about that, too. And I said I'd talk about biases maybe a little bit, too, or some of the gaps that I found beyond what I've already mentioned. But even when the study was being proposed, there was an opportunity for the public to comment on the design. And one of the very disturbing statements to me that really raised red flags was that they said, this is Health Canada, the continued success and viability of wind turbine energy in Canada and around the world will rely upon a thorough understanding of the potential health impacts and community concerns that underscore resistance. So,
well, that's kind of wrong-headed, isn't it? I mean, in terms of a statement of intent?
well, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I read it and I reread it, and I thought, how can our health agency be conducting a study when the real purpose looks to be to ensure the continued success and viability of wind turbine energy?
Yeah, exactly. Kind of biased
and looking at what's causing public resistance, because, of course, you wouldn't want public resistance to get in the way.
Oh, no, we can't have that pesky public resistance,
So, this was a huge issue, and I actually identified that when I wrote to the principal investigator, Dr. Michaud, in September of 2012. That is a hugely concerning statement, and I think we all need to look into that a little bit further. And I know you've spoken in the past a lot with Carmen Krogh, but she has recently connected some of the dots on that, and hopefully you can get your hands on a paper that shows some of the cozy relationships that seem to be happening there.
And what you're really saying is this report, if it were to establish any negative health links between, with the operation of wind turbines, that this report was doomed from the beginning when you look at that statement and ponder it as you did back in 2012.
Exactly. And if you actually dig into it a little bit further, you find that within the Canadian government there's a Wind Technology Roadmap Industry Steering Committee. So the Health Canada study is actually linked to that, and the Canadian Wind Energy Association is a member of that steering committee.
Yeah.
So, also some of the people who are on the advisory committee for this study design and consultation are actually either members of the Canadian Wind Energy Association or are closely linked to them.
Here are the numbers if you have some thoughts on this report. My guest is Joan Morris, who's made a study of it and has a number of, as you can hear, a number of difficulties with its conclusions and some of the facts contained in the report.
You're listening to an exclusive podcast of Gold Hawk Fights Back for You on AM740 Zoomer Radio. Gold Hawk Fights Back for You airs Monday to Friday, 11 to 1 on AM740 Zoomer Radio.
$12:22 on Zoomer Radio. We're talking about the Health Canada wind turbine noise and health study. My guest is epidemiologist Joan Morris. Morris, I'm sorry, have I got your name wrong?
No, that's right.
That's right, Joan Morris. On the line, I have a number of calls here, Joan, so let me just take some of them. Here's John on the line from Port Elgin. John, what are your thoughts?
Well, thanks, Dale. In 2011, Environmental Review Tribunal concluded in the Erickson decision, and I'm reading, the evidence presented to the tribunal demonstrates that wind turbines can cause harm to humans if facilities are placed too close to residents. So the government, Ontario government, has concluded that 550 meters is a setback because 550 meters and below harms individuals. 551 does not harm you. That is just nonsense. There's no expert in the world that can say that 1 meter is going to be the difference between harm and no harm. And my question is, the Canada report, Health Canada report, doesn't even address that.
No, any thoughts on that, Joan Morris? No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't address that. They did do modeling exercises and calculated. That's where I got that 25% from. They calculated that at 550 meters or less, 25% of the people would be very or extremely annoyed. One of the things that we also have to remember is that the study didn't include children, and that's a huge concern. But what about the situations where turbines are located even closer than 550
Well, in
meters?
fact, you've got John on the line from Port Elgin, and John, you well know, and many of us know, that single wind turbine in Port Elgin is a lot closer than 500 meters to a lot of homes right there, right?
It's within 150 to 200, I believe, 200 meters of residences.
Yeah, that's incredible. And then, and so you have people obviously who are being exposed to levels that could be harmful to a number of people. But we also haven't even gone into the area of thought about the people who sign leases to host these, and the turbines are placed very close in some cases to their homes because they forgo the right to that 550-meter setback.
Right.
So they may have consented to have that wind turbine placed closer to their home and knowingly are accepting the risks. But what about their children? What about the people?
has shut down the turbine when it's in a certain direction because it's an admission that it does harm people in a certain direction.
That's
so
right.
if it harms it in a certain direction, it harms it in all directions, is my view.
Yeah.
Right, so they've admitted there's a problem, and they've admitted that people are being harmed.
Absolutely.
John, thanks very much for your thoughts. Joan Morris, I met a farmer during a protest against wind turbines, rode with him on his tractor in a parade, and he told me how he had one of these things on his farm, a wind turbine, and he also owned property in the nearby town, quite a few kilometers away. And on nights when the turbine was active and the wind was blowing fairly strongly, he and his wife would go in town and sleep in what he referred to as his safe house because they couldn't get any sleep in the farmhouse. And that's one of the people who signed up himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have heard that story, and of course we know of a number of people who did not sign contracts, who live in the area, are non-consenting individuals to this whole process, who obviously have to go to safe houses as well. And you've spoken a lot about that in the past as well.
Here's Cecilia on the line from Oakville. Cecilia, do you have any thoughts on this?
Oh, yes. Good afternoon, Dale.
Hi.
A question for Joan Morris. Has any studies been done on the effects of these wind turbines on, things that people may have and that would be exacerbated, conditions that people may have, lung problems, whatever, that may be exacerbated? Has any studies been done on that?
I don't think there have been specific studies done on that, and certainly I'm not an expert on that particular area. I know there have been physicians who have drawn attention to particular people who might be at higher risk. I've heard, although I don't have the evidence of this, but people who are already prone to migraines might be more susceptible to having those increase in frequency or severity if they're exposed to wind turbine effects. And we've also heard that children, for example, who have hypersensitivity disorders or tension disorders, they can actually be at a higher risk of having adverse impacts as well. But certainly that's an area that not enough research has been done in, and that needs to be done.
Cecilia.
Well, just as an example, Palm Desert down in California has an enormous amount of wind turbines right beside them. And my husband and I used to go down every winter to try to get the dry weather for his lungs.
Yeah.
And those wind turbines, the year that we first arrived there, we'd never been there before. We were absolutely astounded at the enormity of how many there were. Mm-hmm. And what followed was we had to have him flown home after 2 months. Everything that had been sort of on hold in his health went totally downhill.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like, when you're talking about this subject here now, and it just caught my attention, I thought, wow, I wonder if that had any effect.
Well, Cecilia, I can tell you that Dr. Robert McMurtry, who has been active in the field and is a former dean of medicine at the Western University, held a wind symposium bringing together all these experts several years ago now. And the bottom line there was that if the wind turbines too close to where you sleep cause you to get less sleep or poor quality sleep, of course that can exacerbate any part of your health picture.
Any condition, yes. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your taking my call and being able to hear Ms. Morris's comment.
Yeah, thank you, Cecilia, very much for telling us that story. Can you stick around for a few more minutes here? We have a number of people who still want to talk to you, Joan Morris.
Sure, not a problem.
You're listening to an exclusive podcast of Gold Hawk Fights Back for You on AM 740 Zoomer Radio. Gold Hawk Fights Back for You airs Monday to Friday, 11 to 1 on AM 740 Zoomer Radio.
It is 12:35 on Zoomer Radio. My guest is epidemiologist Joan Morris, who's talking about the Health Canada study on wind turbines, a study that in its official title seems to indicate no health effects with wind turbines being too close to where you try to get a good night's sleep. And then in the body of the text saying something quite different. Yeah, leaving us with this confused kind of picture. I note, Joan Morris, you say you have that PowerPoint that Health Canada sent out. Just go to the second page, and it's all about the wind industry, and it says, halfway down, Canada's wind industry has set a vision of 20% of Canada's electricity generation by wind power by 2025. Because it's in this report, do you suspect that's reflecting current government thinking on this?
I would think so.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be in there, would it?
That's right.
So,
That's right.
So in other words, there's part of the thinking behind the composition of this report right there. So.
If this were truly a typical health report about protecting the health of Canadians, you would think that it really wouldn't matter what the industry projected or what the industry wanted. It should be about protecting people's health. There are lots of pharmaceutical companies who would like to get their product on the market, but we don't put it on the market just because they want it on there. We do the health studies first. And we protect the health of humans. So I think in this case, it's very concerning that there seems to be an underlying theme.
Well, it's the agenda. It seems to be an agenda, doesn't it? As simple as that.
Exactly.
That sound is me leafing through this report, and it's kind of amusing. The front page is a picture of people enjoying themselves in varying poses. In this whole thing, there isn't a single picture of a wind turbine. Did you notice?
True. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We don't want to show them what they look like, but don't worry about them in any event, right? Mm-hmm. Let's hear. Here are the numbers if you'd like to join in this conversation. 416-360-0740 or 866-740-4740. Anne is on the line from Tiny Township. Anne, do you have a thought or two on this?
Yes. Hi, Dale. And thanks so much, Joan. For
Anne Nahus. I know that voice.
Yes.
Yes, of course. All right.
I would like to speak about studies that are created with a certain perspective. It makes a certain bias, and I am especially skeptical when I hear the terms mathematical modeling. Mathematical models being used when they use averages and not at the upper and lower limits.
Well, we heard a lot about that during the Dump Site 41 battle, didn't we?
Yes. We actually had to repeatedly ask for what the inputted numbers were to the study, and we had to do frequent Freedom of Information requests, and we never were successful in getting the model. And so I'm wondering, is there going to be a presentation of this report, and are they willing to share their model?
Joan Morris, do you know that?
I don't know that.
Yeah.
I haven't gone digging myself too much, I will say, in the Health Canada website to see if there's anything further beyond what I have in that brief report and the PowerPoint presentation that I've obtained. I don't know that anything else is available at this point from what I've heard.
Well, it would be nice if we could get their model and then put numbers that were maybe more indicative of what's really happening to see what the results are. And if it has been financed in any way by the government, it should be available through a Freedom of Information or...
Yes, but we know, ironically, the mod flow data from dump site 41 remains under lock and key to this very day.
Yes. Because the project finally was dismissed and we were very happy with that, we ended up not pursuing it as well, but and the engineer involved actually had retired. But we feel strongly that this is a strong indication that there was concerns that, or why else would they want to hold it in secret? So I also wanted to comment about the comments about the people who live there who signed permission. A lot of them would have been told repeatedly that there's no impacts on their health, and I'm sure took the person's word for it, and so possibly signed an agreement putting them in the crosshairs, but we're told
now they can,
otherwise is what I've been told by many farmers in the communities.
Yeah, but Anne, now they can wave this Health Canada report in somebody's face and say, see? And if you read the first couple of pages, it sounds just fine, unless you delve into it and find out it's not fine at all.
Yes, I'm so shocked that we're still allowing these type of studies to be done, and I'm hoping that we can call on the government for a peer review of this, because this doesn't seem like a responsible way, especially if they're trying to get a 20%, up to 20% of our energy being, like, how many more are we?
Well, how many wind
turbines
would,
at risk?
I wonder how many wind turbines that would mean for Ontario alone. At 20%, there'd be a wind turbine every few, well, good grief.
Yeah,
it would be
seems like a lobby document, actually, to get the government to approve more funding, more so than a health study.
And thanks very much. I think that was partly what you were saying as well about this.
Yes, definitely the preamble for the purpose of the study and the, as you pointed out, the page on the PowerPoint presentation appear not to have the primary focus of protecting the health of Canadians, and that to me is very disturbing.
I seem with this report, this latest chapter in this whole long battle about wind turbines and making sure the wind turbines do no harm, that there's this growing feeling of genuine anger about how these things are playing out. Do you feel that yourself? Are you noticing that?
Oh, definitely I'm noticing it because I've met personally a number of the people who can no longer live in their homes, and the fact that we're doing this to people right within communities here in Ontario is, it's inexcusable because these people have names and faces, and they didn't consent to these exposures. In some cases, they did welcome the project. They had no idea. In other cases, they were opposed to the project, but regardless of that, the end result was that they have a home they can no longer live in. Their lives have been totally uprooted, destroyed. Financially, they've had major impacts. It's understandable that there would be anger associated with that, no question.
And I'm wondering as well, though, on the other side of that same wagon, if this report will actually help empower the many groups who are aligned trying to get some fair treatment here with the wind turbine development. Maybe it will be, maybe it's just the kind of thing that some of these movement groups need to spur them on.
I agree. I think that's a very valid point, and I think that if you look at the details and you find that there is actually, despite all of the methodological issues and the gaps and the biases, they've actually admitted that at the sound levels that people are being exposed to in Ontario, there are problems, and those problems with annoyance could impact your health. I think there's an admission there that really people are going to latch on and do something about it. And I should also mention that in Wisconsin, there's actually been a municipality whose Board of Health has declared wind turbines to be a health hazard. Mm-hmm. So there's traction starting to gain on what people are observing in other municipalities and other jurisdictions.
All right, let's take one last call from Earl on the line in Oakville. Earl, do you have a comment or a question?
Yes, Dale. All I have to say is that I think this should be made an election issue. I think people should get together and confront the government with it.
with the upcoming federal election.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, take care, Dale.
All right, thanks very much. Well, if enough of a groundswell develops about this, Joan Morris, perhaps it would be an election issue, and that election could be coming as soon as the spring of 2015, relative few months away.
Well, yes, and I guess one of the difficulties is that a lot of the population is not aware of the issues, and they're not closely impacted themselves. I think to a large extent, the people in urban municipalities and in urban environments don't see this as an issue because it doesn't impact them personally.
Absolutely.
And so you end up in a bit of a numbers game situation. The people in rural Ontario have already spoken in the past in their aversion to re-electing Liberal candidates. In rural Ontario, we've definitely seen that. But will it impact overall? That's difficult to say because of the urban-rural mix.
No, I understand that, but look at the provincial Tories. They were aligned against wind turbines under Tim Hudak. In fact, promised to impose a moratorium if they were elected, return local planning to local municipalities. They were very much on the side of the Turbinistas.
True, that's true. And if you look, I guess not so much in the last election, but the one prior to that, that definitely did have an impact on the maps that you saw throughout Ontario.
Absolutely, it did. Mm-hmm. Joan, thanks very much for spending time with us and giving us your perspective. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, bye for now. All right. That's epidemiologist Joan Morris.
You're listening to an exclusive podcast of Gold Hog Fights Back for You on AM 740 Zoomer Radio.